Hello and welcome to Love Us Anyway, to Love Us Anyway. And I'm Fantasia, and I'm here with Zana Ray and April. So I have two amazing people, friends, sisters today, and we're going to actually talk about why we started this podcast in this way and why the title, Love Us Anyway. So, I'm gonna let either one of y'all we can kind of kick it off and just talk about all of the feels around what it means to us. And yeah, we can just go from there.
So the love us anyway, since I was kind of after making some of the decisions, and when I heard the title, it just absolutely spoke to like maybe where I'm at in my life right now, right? To accept me just as I am, communicate with me just as I am, love me just as I mean, if you boil it down, that's just what it is. The sentiment of it. And so to me, it just really speaks to being genuine, to being authentic, for being real. And just in this moment, um, let's always begin and end with love.
Mm. I love that. And I also appreciate that you mentioned because you mentioned, yeah, so when I came into it. So just to speak to that, originally, April and I were talking about all of the ways that we can love each other, but then how people can love themselves. And that really, the theme came across, just love me anyway. Like, regardless of my faults, my flaws, my insecurities, all of the ways that I show up, love me anyway. And it became love us anyway, you know? And then kind of really figuring out ways to just kind of really have raw, real conversations, not just only about our mindfulness practices on a daily basis, but having conversations about love, about life, about sharing our perfectly imperfect stories, self-care, um, yeah, and so all of the different aspects, but also hearing from real people who where the intention is, yeah, just to show up as we are and not to put on for any reason because we don't have to. So we were talking about it originally, April and I, and then Donna in another conversation was talking about the same thing. And I'm like, wait a second, we have to connect the dots and all three of us have to get together in this way. This is super dope.
It is. Yeah, the term love us, and I think about the moments I've been saying it recently, and it was very much been inspired by you, Fantasia, around these moments of human imperfection. That if I trace back moments in my past where I would make mistakes or be imperfect or what have you, it would lend itself to one of two things. One, me like removing myself from the connection in fear that if I was not in a certain condition or could not perform in a certain way, that I did not belong in that space.
Yeah.
Or two, those moments of making mistake and then leading to having to really effort to over explain the why the mistakes were happening and then seeking external validation that the explanation for the mistake was okay enough to still belong. But I love the almost like self-empowering casualness that comes from, yeah, I messed up, but love me anyways.
Yeah.
Period. No explanation needed. No need to like come up with some sort of digestible script to the audience, but that they can understand to then allow me to belong there. It's like, nope, made that mistake, love me anyway. Look this way, love me anyway. Sounded that way, love me anyway. Just love us anyways. And I have seen on the other side of that equation, almost like this like softening of the person, whoever's there. Because when we say love us anyways, it's like a permission to that other person be their true human self too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that you mentioned that because I didn't notice it until now. Like when you said it, I'm like, oh yeah, because when we do say that to people, it's kind of like, oh, okay, I'm free to be me. And it's
You remember
judgment.
all the times we've done workshops, Fantasia, when you used to struggle with the speakers, with the music?
Uh-huh.
It would always come on really loud
Yeah.
and you wouldn't be able to do the fadeaway. That's like, I remember those moments where you're like, yeah, that happened, but love me anyway.
Right,
Like those
right, right.
spaces of you know, it doesn't have to be so serious.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm flawed, right? And so we all are. And so it doesn't have to be perfect. And yeah, I feel like this space is really a space for us to be who we are in our authentic bodies and selves without judgment, and also having that gentle reminder and push that, yeah, we're worthy of love, flaws and all. And so just love us anyway. Yeah.
It was a word, April, that you said more than once about belong.
Mm.
Mm,
And so I first belong to myself. And once I own that and move in the world with that, then being in other spaces, I feel more confident, right? And so just love me anyway, because like you were saying, I got tongue tied,
Mm.
or I started sweating in the middle of my presentation, and now I'm like even more self-conscious about that. Right.
Mhm.
And so knowing that I belong to myself, like I can feel that, then right behind it is just like love me anyway, just in this moment as it's happening. And so for me, that's just really embracing like myself, number one. And then I can take up more space when I'm with other people.
mm,
Mm.
mm. There
Mm.
is something beautifully disruptive of love us anyways, because it disrupts any sort of messaging or narrative that we may have received that we had to be a certain way.
Mhm.
And that could be to others, but also, Donna, kind of like our relationship to ourselves. I know
Mhm.
throughout my life, like even though the messages came from the outside about having to be a certain condition to be loved, that started to go from the external to like internal schemas in the mind of how I spoke to myself.
Mhm.
So love us anyways is not just like a phrase to the outside, but it's also like it's like you're talking to yourself too at the same
Yeah.
time. Like I love
Mm.
me anyways.
I love me anyway. And I feel like in repeating it is something that yeah, sometimes some of us may have to really think about believing it. It may be hard to believe that we love ourselves anyway, regardless of our flaws. That may be a hard practice in the beginning, right? Love me anyway. No, really, I don't, because, and then make all of the reasons why or the excuses because of our imperfections. When it's one of those things where you speak it because there's power in the tongue, that we begin to believe it because we love ourselves and you love yourself. Um, you start to love other people too, with their flaws and their imperfections and all of the things that come up for them. And I think that's one thing that's really important to me anyway. Loving people is like at the center of all that I do. And I just hope that when I'm in community with people, that that's what they see and that's what they feel, and the energy is felt in that way. But I love myself and I love people anyway, even when they get on my nerves. I may have to take some space, but I love them anyway. Yeah.
I think it's a set point,
Hmm. Tell me more about that.
just where you can keep coming back to, right?
Mhm.
Kind of anchor myself in that. I was on a call earlier today, and someone offered a practice of, I think the teacher gave her 5 minutes standing in the mirror, saying to herself, looking at her reflection, "You are the one that you're looking for." And so she gave a little bit of background on how that was going. And so when I hear us talking about that part, another alternative is, I love myself anyway. I love myself anyway. It's like an affirmation. It's a mantra that you keep saying until you can start to reprogram your own mind about, when I was a kid, or when I was in my 20s, or when I, like all these other negative memories that just keep flooding,
Mhm.
the mind is like, I love you anyway. I love
Yeah.
you anyway, right? Like just to get it to make a new set point for myself, an anchor that I can keep coming back to. And then, like you said, then it just kind of, then it just the echoes of that to
Mhm.
other areas of my life, other people in my life, and to everyone I come in contact with.
I love that.
It's interesting when I think about love us anyways. The one thing that came to my mind as I'm not sure if this would work is if harm is happening.
Mm,
I'm like, I don't want you to love me anyways if I am harming you. And then I
mm,
started to think about the people in my life, because I've had a history of some not so good relationships, we'll call them,
mhm,
and how those folks sometimes asked of me to love them anyways, even though they
mhm,
were hurting me deeply in many ways. And then I was like, oh, I don't know about this title anymore. And then I traced it back to like childhood and was got really curious around what if more children, without feeling like they need to be a certain way, present a certain way, act a certain way, perform a certain way, if they were loved anyways.
mm,
It gets me really curious that if that was like an intuitive message that all of us received early on, how much of that potential harm that people put into the world may not be there as much.
mm.
So it got me really thinking about the power of this type of mindset, um having it early on,
Yeah,
and how
yeah,
much harm it could potentially disrupt or change,
yeah.
from the roots. Yeah.
Mm. And I appreciate that you brought up, yeah, how do I love somebody anyway if they're harming me in any aspect, emotional, physical, or, whatever. And I think for me, that's where that what I said earlier comes into play too. Like, I'm gonna love you from a distance because I need to create space in this relationship or this situation, um, so that I'm not continuously or affected in whatever you bring to the table. So I'm gonna love you anyway, but from over here.
Mm.
And that
And
sounds like a boundary,
yeah, yeah.
right? I mean, we don't want to put ourselves in harm way, and we
Hmm.
don't want to put up with behavior as disrespectful. And in order for us to stay in relationship, I'm gonna need one, two, and three. And I love you. I love you still,
Yeah.
right? At the essence of who you are, who I am, I love you. And like you said, I can't be around you. Or this relationship, I need a break, or whatever the boundary is,
Hmm.
because the love doesn't go anywhere.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know for me, because I love people down, and this is just transparency, like they may have harmed or hurt me, and that love is so deep and thick that I still show up. Right? I don't create that boundary or space in those moments, maybe early on, until it's really like, okay, girl, how much are you willing to take before you're just like, okay, this is enough, right? And so I'm sure there's plenty of people probably that have been through or experienced or go through that space too. And what I've learned from that is you have to set boundaries. And if those boundaries that you set in those type of relationships or situations, um, yeah, you gotta figure out how to kind of, yeah, really create that space and make sure that your boundaries and your needs are met. And loving people anyway, and mostly, and importantly, what Donna said early on, loving yourself anyway. Yeah.
Well, I love the title. I love the vision, and I love all the what's possible, what's coming. So I'm so glad that we're having this conversation to set up our listeners. So
They can kind of know what to expect.
yeah.
And just to close us out, April, because I love all of your words of wisdom, and thank you, Donna, for sharing your pieces too. Um, yeah, so sometimes everybody's going to see all three of us or hear all three of us. Sometime it'll be a duo, but it'll be about different experiences as we show up as our authentic selves and also incorporate our mindfulness practices that we all have. And April, what are some words that you'd like to share before we close out? I know you have something for the people.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Right. Right. And then she says nothing and it's cricket.
I don't, but love me anyway, y'all. I don't, but love me anyways. I think what would be interesting from all of us, it got me thinking about, and I'll invite the listeners to do this as well, about either like write down or say out loud something that has happened or a part of you that you may have apologized in the past, but now you want to claim it and say like, love me anyways. So first I'll start and then gives you all a little time to think as well. I don't know how to be a perfect foster mom to my child. I'm still learning. My child may be screaming on the subway every once in a while. Sometimes I'm a pillar of peace. Other times I am a example of frustration. And love me anyways.
When you call me or text me and I don't respond in a timely manner, and you think that I'm too busy or that I may have forgotten about you, know that I'm here and love me anyway.
What's coming up for me? Sometimes when I snap because I'm triggered by even something small, and that could be a range of things from my children, from my partner, from family members, from work, from life, and I react instead of responding in a sense, and my practice doesn't like play out right in that way. Love me anyway. And yeah, and don't remind me about my mindfulness practice because I know that I have one.
That's funny.
Like the biggest thing. Oh, remember your practice. Thank you. Love me anyway. Yeah, love me anyway. Well, I appreciate y'all. I really do. And I look forward to this journey of, yeah, just good, real conversations. And so we hope that you all continue to tune in as well. Thank y'all. Thank y'all for showing up in the way that you do. And thank you for loving me anyway. I love y'all anyway. And yeah, until next time, we'll see y'all later.